told it to record to this computer, and then it was like, recordings in the cloud only last 180 days. I'm like, I thought I clicked record to the computer. Okay. So please state your name, your major, your year, and where you're from.
My name is Corynne Menard. I am a junior here at Ball State. This is actually my first semester at Ball State because I transferred from Ivy Tech Community College. And I am double majoring in marketing and sports administration, and I'm minoring in strategic communications.
Awesome. And did you say where you're from?
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. Well, where I'm from is kind of a weird story. So my dad was in the Air Force for 20 years, and so we moved all over the place every 5 years, if not less than 5 years. So I don't really have a hometown, but I've kind of adopted Monroe, Michigan as my hometown because after my dad retired from the Air Force, I started high school there and I finished high school there, and both of my parents went to high school there and they both have family from there. So I guess you could say Monroe, Michigan.
All right. Awesome. So how did you end up in this class?
Well, when I signed up over the summer, I met virtually with one of the honors advisors, and he had asked me if what honors classes I wanted to take this semester. And at the time when I signed up, he just told me, it's $199, it's a humanities course. And so I didn't really know exactly what it was. Same with you, like till later in the summer. And then once I got my books and found out what it was about, I was really geeked about it and excited because it's a class that is very timely at the moment and really important. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you found out what the subject of the class was going to be, what the focus of the class was, what kind of expectations do you have coming into the class then?
Well, I know one thing that I really wanted to learn more about was just terminology in general. And that's something that I feel that this class has done a really good job at because I wanted to speak out and be more anti-racist, but I felt that I needed more knowledge to back that up. And terminology is a big part of that because people want to know that you know what you're talking about. So having that terminology to back it up was huge. So that was the one thing that I really wanted to, and just knowing how to be more anti-racist than I already was.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, absolutely. So what's the neighborhood like in Monroe, Michigan?
Well, our professor said it really well because he and I are both from Michigan, and he's from about an hour north of Monroe. And Monroe is known as being full of a bunch of conservative rednecks that are racist, and there's a lot of drug problems, and he's completely right. All of those things are correct, and it's just gotten worse since I left almost 10 years ago. So that was a big reason why I wanted to leave, was just to get away from just all of the Confederate flags and all of the just very racist things that I heard in high school, and just the amount of drug use also was just insane. So many people were losing their lives, especially to heroin. There's a really big problem there for heroin. I know there were people from my high school that died from overdosing from it. And, there was a group that was started because it was so bad to help collect needles and help people get into rehab. So yeah, not the greatest town.
That sucks, and that's very unfortunate. Yeah, I hate seeing Confederate flags this far north because you can't even use Southern heritage as an excuse.
Nope. And, unfortunately, a lot of those people that fly them, if you try to even talk to them about it and let them know, remind them that they lost and, all of this
States'
other stuff.
rights.
Yeah, it just perpetuates the whole, they're racist. And like for a long time, I remember saying like, yo, that flag is racist. And a lot of people were just like, what do you mean? Like, it's just Confederate pride. And I'm like, it's pride on the fact that the South was fighting against having, you know, blacks and whites and people of color live together harmoniously. So yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, before I moved to Muncie, I was living in Kokomo. Not by choice. I just moved there because my husband got a job there. And I started going to Ivy Tech there. And it was very similar to Monroe. Lots of drugs, lots of Confederate flags, lots of racism, extremely predominantly white. I want to say that Monroe and Kokomo both are probably, you know, 90% white, if not more. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty typical for Indiana outside of Gary, South Bend, and Indianapolis, pretty much.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you ever think much about race?
I think the first time that I really thought about race was my best friend in third grade. His name's Ryan. We're still friends to this day. And he's mixed. He is half black. His parents, his mom is white and his dad is black. And so he was like one of the first friends that I made that was not white, because this elementary school that I went to was in upstate New York at the time, which is like as white as the snow up there. So, but we did see quite a few different students of color because we were on a military base. And so being on a military base, there were several people of color. And so I actually met Ryan on base. There was a youth activity center that it was basically a Latkey program for kids after school. Like the buses would take us there. And I didn't have any classes with them, so I met him there. And we just became instant best friends. And you know, I remember the first time I went over to his house, it was the first time I'd been in a home with an interracial family. And so to see that dynamic and how it was different from mine, which was all white, was interesting, and also just, you know, really opened my eyes to race in general. So I would say about third or fourth grade. Yep.
And when people around you talked about race, what were those conversations like?
Well, I would say I really didn't start understanding and grasping conversations of race until I got to high school. But specifically in marching band, we were pretty big. We had about 150 people. And our marching band was like 98% white. We had, in the entire marching band, we had 2 black students. And I remember several times just hearing racist comments. And I know the one guy, bless his heart, I mean, he tried so hard to just kind of laugh it off and play it cool, because it was mostly guys in his section that would make jokes, and they thought they were making jokes, but it was actually, you know, racist microaggression. And I could tell he just hated it, but he just wanted to fit in, and he didn't have, like, you know, there was one other person that he could really relate to of his skin color. And so one specific instance that I remember, and I'll never forget it, at our band camp every year, every day we would have a day designated to how you would dress for that day. Like our famous one was Toga Thursday, and we stayed at Michigan State University in the dorms, because it was over the summer, so there weren't any students there. And so we would like take the bed sheets off, like the top sheets, and march in togas. It was interesting. But most of the days were just normal, like, you know, Wacky Wednesday and like all this other stuff. But there was Monday, like, never stuck. There was never a theme that stuck. And I remember one year, this guy was like, hey, we should do Ghetto Monday, and everybody should, like, you know, dress like you're ghetto. And whew, like, I knew then, I was just like, that is not a good idea. And this was 10th grade for me. And there were a lot of people that ended up showing up anyway, because our band director forbid it. He was like, no, that's not okay. But people still did. So they came in wearing, you know, they've got like baggy jeans and like super baggy shirts, and they'd have their pants down really far and like hats turned to the side, and oh, it was just a hot mess. And I felt very uncomfortable for the two students in our band who were of color. And I know it had to have hurt them. So yeah, a lot of, and it wasn't just that. I mean, it was just, it wasn't just in band, but it was also just at our high school in general. We had to tell you how redneck our high school was, the last week of school every year, they would, a lot of the farmers in the area, because it's a lot of farmers, they would drive their tractors to school, and like most, if not all of them, had giant Confederate flags flying on the back of them. And it was just a reminder of the situation and the school that I was a part of. But I was very thankful to have met and still be friends with a lot of students who completely disagreed with those students who were flying the flag. And many of them are people of color. And I just have to give them a lot of props for what they dealt with, because there was just too much that they did deal with. So.
Yeah. So when was the first time that you began to see yourself as someone with a race?
Honestly, I truly didn't really think about race as much as I did until this class. I know one thing that we talked about that really just, I had never even thought about, was when we learned about the term Caucasian and, you know, the term, what it means, where it came from, who created it, why they did. And that was just like, really? Are you serious? Like, why is this, you know, why is this a thing? Why is this okay? And, you know, I never really, because white has been considered the norm or the top race for such a long time, and being white, it just, I don't know, I guess I just never really truly thought about it until this class. But now that I've had this class, you know, I know that being white, I come from a place of privilege. And, you know, it's good to know that, you know, we have learned so many things and terminology and just ways to talk about race, to know more about our own, but also about other people's race as well.
So how do your other identities or social positions like gender, class, region, religion, etc., shape your experience?
Well, there's a couple of things that I feel that I could somewhat relate to in discussions we had. I know when we talked about microaggressions, that was one that, two things about me in particular, well, I would say three things about me in particular that I've faced a lot of microaggressions, one being female. Since I'm majoring in sports administration, I've always just been into things that mostly are male dominated, whether it's sports and video games are like two of the biggest ones that I'm a huge fan of and want to do stuff with, and just like internet memes in general, and just internet communities. It's just super male dominated. I know I was talking to a girl who's in the intro to sports administration class this semester, which I'm taking next semester. And she said out of like 60 some students, there's 4 women. And so she said, well, let me know how many girls are in your class next semester, because I'd be very interested to know. And so I know going into it that it's always been, well, you know, I can either be my female self, or I can, you know, try to think of some guy jokes that are funny and try to fit in a little bit better that way. And so, but you hear, especially with like gaming and stuff, I've heard so many things, especially online, where it's like, oh, are you a 12-year-old boy or are you a girl? You know, and it's like, I'm female. And they're like, well, why aren't you in the kitchen? You know, it's stuff like that, that like, you hear it so much that eventually it just is like, what else you got? Like, you know, and that's really sad. That's really sad. And I'm a really good cook, so I like being in the kitchen. But it's something that everybody should know how to cook. So it shouldn't be something that's gendered like that. But another thing is that I'm disabled, and it's an invisible disability, which is fibromyalgia. I have chronic pain, and I'm in pain all the time. And so I miss classes because of it. I'm not able to go to all the events that I want to go to because of it. And I've heard so many things like it's in your head, you're making it up, because I'm not like in a wheelchair or I don't have a cast or crutches. And last year I broke my ankle and I was in a wheelchair and a boot. And it was just like, oh, wow, this is what it's like when people actually recognize your disability. And are like, oh, let me help you, let me give you your seat. But because like if I go on a train and I want to sit in the handicap spot, people will look at me funny because I can stand up and walk around. But it doesn't mean that I'm not in pain. So that was another one. And then the last one would be that I'm bisexual, and I have been for a long time. And I've gotten, especially one that was really weird to me to get used to, was I got a lot of microaggressions from the lesbian community saying that I wasn't gay enough, or that, you know, oh, well, you like men, so gross, you know, or whatever. And it was just odd. I just never expected that. You know, I had never even heard, like, what is gay enough? You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know there was like a list or a spectrum that you had to reach a certain point to be a certain sexuality. And so I hope that maybe has changed in the last 10 years. And now that I'm married to a man, I also get, you know, oh, well, you can't be bi because you're married to a man, or, oh, are you going to cheat on him with a woman? You know, and it's like, I'm still me. These microaggressions still hurt. And so when we learned about microaggressions when it comes to race, those, you know, hearing things like, you know, like you had said, where your parents had asked, oh, where are your parents from? Or, you know, oh, do you speak in English, or, you know, anything like that. It all goes to the same place of hurt, and it all goes to the same place of, you know, eventually you almost become numb to it, and that's not okay. So hearing those microaggressions with race, I don't want to say I was able to relate, because I can't relate, but I was able to understand the place of hurt that it goes to and how I feel, and knowing how others feel when they receive those microaggressions. So it made me more aware. And, you know, nobody's perfect. I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, have made some kind of microaggression in the past. But, you know, the most important part is that you recognize it and you grow from it.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of biphobia in the LGBTQ community, and being part of that community, that frustrates me, because like we talk about gender being a spectrum and sexuality being a spectrum, but then if you're in the middle of like the sexuality spectrum, suddenly you're not allowed to be there. It's like,
yeah,
that doesn't
really
make
weird.
sense.
Yeah, and you know, it's great. Like, I just made a tweet the other day about you know, being bisexual, and now, like, even though I'm married to a man, it doesn't change that. And you know, there were people who were like, you're valid, and you know, that's great, and all that support is always wonderful. But then I had a family member who got on there and was like, what do you mean? I didn't know that about you. And I'm like, it doesn't change anything about me or like my marriage or anything. I'm not going to go like cheat on him with a woman. It has nothing to do with that. It just means that I've just always been this way, and it's not, it doesn't have, that's the thing that I've realized the most since being married, is people think that I'm just going to like go and cheat on him with a woman. And it's like, no, I got married to him because I love him and I want to be with just him. So I don't know why that comes up, but yeah, any kind of phobia like that is really damaging. So
it doesn't change who you are as a person. It just changes the way you experience life.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So one of the themes of the class has been that race structures our global society. It's not just something over here or over there, or something that only affects otherized or racialized groups of people. We're all living in the system, and we all have the capability to imagine and to help create something different, a more equal society. So where does Monroe, Michigan, for example, fit in the system, and where do you fit in that system?
Well, I know I certainly didn't fit in Monroe's system. And I noticed that as soon as I got there. And I know that there's still a lot of unfortunately, they're just one of those communities that seems to be stuck in their ways. And a lot of people don't seem to like change. I know one thing in particular, and I've heard that there are other cities in Indiana that are similar. So I don't know if maybe it's a Midwest system in that way, especially for like smaller white towns. But a lot of them aren't welcome to like new business or like new things in general. And a lot of people are just like, oh, we just want things to stay the same. And, and unfortunately, like, if you have that mentality, not only as a community, but as a city, as a county, as a state, it just furthers the systemic racism. It furthers these ideologies that, change is bad, and that allowing people that are different than you and businesses that are different from your regular like Applebee's or something. Those seem to be like, unfortunately, some of the only businesses that survive. And it's like very white, and, their head chef is a microwave. So like, if you're okay with that, that's how you are. But that kind of stuff is not okay. I mean, I grew up several times learning about how our country is supposed to be this giant melting pot. And that diversity will only make us better. And I still agree with that. And I can see that when that happens, that cities thrive. And so when you have these cities that just want to be stuck in their old ways and they don't allow new changes to come through, they're just kind of stuck. And that's a big reason why I left. I want to live somewhere that promotes change for the better and doesn't have a system that is racist and old and tiring and doesn't work. So that's pretty much how I would explain Monroe. Yep.
Yeah. So how have the events of 2020, the pandemic, the uprisings and activism, the election, and other current events shaped your perception of racism and anti-racism in the United States?
I think this year has been probably the most eye-opening year that I've experienced so far. I am 30 this year, so I'm a bit older than your traditional college student. And so, like, as far as like the millennials point of view, I feel like most of us, we saw a live terrorist attack on TV. I was in 6th grade when that happened. And I know I just talked to a freshman and she was like, oh, I wasn't even born yet. And to me, I was just like, what? Because that event right there, I feel like shaped us in such a weird and frightening way. Especially, I was 11 when that happened. And so seeing that, it was like, where am I living? Why is this happening? And there were so many racist incidents that happened. Islamophobia was humongous after that. And especially like since I lived on a military base, I didn't see as much phobia there because they tended to be more, at least where we were stationed, they were a bit more accepting of different races. But man, I just remember so many just jokes, and I put them in quotations because they're not funny and they're not jokes, but things about like, oh, they're wearing a towel and like, don't let them on the plane and all this other stuff. And it's like, you guys, this is horrible. So that was like the first like really big incident that really opened my eyes to racism in that regard. And then we had in 2008, I graduated from high school during the recession. So that sucked because like gas was like $4 when I got my license. Um, that was a horrible time. I have really bad timing. I just think millennials, unfortunately, have gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to a lot of big events that have been traumatic. A lot of us graduated around the time of the recession from high school, and so going into college was just my parents were like, can't afford it. So that's why I'm going now, because it took me 10 years of working to save up money to be able to actually go. And I had to start out at community college because that's all I could afford. So all of that, a lot of us, were undereducated because of that. And then now we're going into 2020 with a pandemic, and we're kind of feeling the same vibes as the recession that happened in 2008 of like, people are out of work. It's hard if you're in college, it's online, it's completely just totally different. And there's also there's been a lot of racist things that have happened this year. And it started, I feel like a big push was when Trump got elected in 2016. And, I kept seeing things like, oh, well, Trump, brought out more racists. And, to a point that's true, but a lot of them were still really racist during the Obama administration as well. I remember seeing people make like mannequins of Obama and hanging them from a tree. And, they were still there. It's just he gave them a platform. And so in 2020, now we've got this pandemic. And then you've got, George Floyd, you've got Breonna Taylor, among many other unfortunate incidents. And it keeps happening. I know just yesterday I saw in the news that there was a family that the police broke into their home and killed their young son, and they were of color. And I was like, of course. And it just doesn't seem to stop. And it just keeps going. And when you see that, and then when you have like Kyle Rittenhouse, a white kid who took way too many guns that he didn't need, and just decided, oh, I'm just going to shoot people that are protesting against what's happening, and then he gets out on bail, no problem, because a bunch of racists donated to a GoFundMe to help pay for that, for him to get out. It's still a messed up system. It still is. 2020 has brought out a lot of racism, especially with just the pandemic in general. People of color are more affected by the virus, and poorer communities have suffered a lot due to it, whether it's jobs or getting PPE and coverage in general. So 2020 has been an extreme eye-opener, to say the least. But I hope with the Biden administration that we'll see some changes in the next 4 years.
Yeah. I mean, with the people he's choosing for like his cabinet and other government positions, things are looking promising.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I read that Biden was the first president to ever mention transgender and non-binary people in a presidential speech. And that's huge. Trump would never say that unless it was disgusting. So, and the fact that he chose a Black man to serve as one of the highest positions in the military, I mean, that's awesome. So I'm really looking forward to their administration, and I hope that they push for things. I know he wasn't my first choice, but he definitely was a better choice than Trump. So I will take that. And I feel like there's a lot of people that, like millennials and Gen Zs especially, that felt that way. But we would much rather move forward, because it feels like in some respects we've gone back 50 years. So it's time to move forward.
In many ways, the Democratic Party today represents the Republican Party of the 70s.
Yeah, which is crazy to think about. But, if that's the party that's going to push for change and anti-racist things, then I'm going to vote for them. So, and I've always been very left-leaning anyway. So,
Yeah. And I feel like 2008 and then the events of this year, especially like just pushed millennials and Gen Z even further to the political left.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Especially with, I feel like there's been like Gen Z has even pushed even harder than millennials did. And you know, as a 30-year-old, like seeing 19-year-olds, you know, vote for the first time, and they're like, "I'm never voting red." I'm just like, "Yay! Thank you! Like, thank you." Because there's still a lot of millennials that are very backwards thinking, and it's unfortunate. But you know, to see, I think I saw a meme that was like, you know, get them, like go, you know, go at them. It was like millennials to Gen Z, and it was, yeah, it was great. So I'm glad that younger generations are waking up and pushing for change compared to other generations.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Have you been involved in any anti-racist actions or activities this year?
So I did. When I lived in Kokomo, they had, I forget what the event name was called, but it was during all the George Floyd protests going on, and it was basically Kokomo's version of that. And I went to that one in particular because, you know, the pandemic was still very much alive as it is now. And I didn't want to go to like Indy where there would be hundreds, if not thousands of people. And I'm immunocompromised, so I have to be careful. And so I went to Kokomo because I knew it would be a smaller crowd. But it didn't mean that it was less effective because I had found out the day that they had set it up was on purpose because it was exactly 100 years after the largest KKK rally was held in the United States, which was in Kokomo. When I found that out, I just had goosebumps knowing that, yeah, it sucks. It took 100 years. That's way too long. But I had goosebumps because it was like, wow, this is a very powerful thing to be a part of. And I made a sign that says color is not a crime. And in color, I made it in rainbow colors because I also wanted to include LGBTQ communities as well as people of color because there's a lot of intersectionality there. And so even before I knew exactly what intersectionality was, I was promoting that people pay attention to it. So I was really proud to be able to go to that. And that's the only one I went to. I wish I could have gone to more, but like I said, I do have to be careful when it comes to big groups and big meetings because I have not so great lungs. So I know that if I were hit with coronavirus, it might be troublesome. So, but that was really powerful to be a part of.
Yeah. And speaking of intersectionality, like Black trans women in particular are some of the most discriminated people in this country.
Yeah, it's really sad. And too many of them have lost their lives over just senseless, baseless racism. And I hope that the Biden administration will help recognize that that needs to stop and that we can come up with either some kind of law or like I know they after Breonna Taylor got murdered, they created, I think it was, well, they created Breonna's law, which is where the police can't enter without knocking and letting them know that they're there. So, you know, I hope that the Biden administration not only pushes that law, but that they push laws specifically catered towards Black trans women because they really need the help.
Yeah. How would you describe race relations or issues at Ball State?
Well, I know we had during our class, we had a couple of speakers that are part of and I can't remember what the name of the group is on campus, but they work with diversity and anti-racist policies. And hearing from them was really great to know that, yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, but you know, Ball State has made a lot of improvements over the last couple of years since they've created this diversity group. So that made me feel really good to be a part of that because, for example, my husband went to Purdue, which is predominantly white, but they don't have anything like that on their campus. And at least from when I talked to him. Now, he graduated in 2016, so I don't know if maybe in the last couple years they've added anything. But when I had talked to him about it, and I also talked to several of his friends that I've become friends with as well, and none of them had mentioned any kind of diversity program or center or anything like that. And that's a huge campus. So I'm surprised they don't have anything like that, especially because Purdue has a ton of international students. So I'm really surprised that they don't. But I know my husband said in particular, in the engineering program, there are a lot of Chinese professors, and that there were tons of students on like Rate My Professor and like online in general, just making really racist comments about how they couldn't understand them because of their language. And oof, I'm just like, this is a huge campus. That's a problem. So, you know, the fact that Purdue hired these teachers from different backgrounds is great. But then when you have students that act like that, it's not so great. So I'm glad to know that Ball State has a program to help push for ethnicity and just anti-racism in general. And, you know, I think college campuses in general have a long way to go, but it makes me proud to know that our school is working on it.
Yeah, that's genuinely shocking that Purdue, a school at least twice the size of Ball State, doesn't have anything like that. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and you know, when he told me about, because we went to a couple of Purdue weddings of friends of his that got married, and there were a lot of people there that were Asian descent, and they're lovely people, and you shouldn't make fun of them because there's a language barrier, and they are there to help you and help you further your education. So, you know, knowing that people are making racist comments at a school that's supposed to be just, it's Purdue. I mean, you know, so people hear that and they're like, wow, it's so great. But I've heard a lot of really bad things about their administration. So I hope that since 2016 they've done some work, but I don't really know if they have. So it's like I said, it's good to know that Ball State has a program and they're actively working on trying to fix some of those things.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of universities are trying to play catch up with that sort of thing after like all the things that happened over the summer. Yeah. And I'm glad that at Ball State things seem to be more proactive. Like this class was created before any of those protests happened. And we had like the SAIAC long before any of those protests happened. So knowing that they existed beforehand makes it feel a lot more proactive instead of reactive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's being proactive in anti-racism is probably the biggest thing that you can do. You know, there's already wrongs that unfortunately can't be undone, but if you know, try to stop them in their tracks before it gets even worse, that's the best you can do.
Yeah. And Ball State is a very diverse place, yet a historically and predominantly white institution. How have you navigated that diversity and that whiteness at Ball State since you arrived?
Well, it's kind of tough because since we did so much online, and especially too, like not a lot of students, I know I'm one of them that like, unless I'm presenting, I don't have my camera on. And so like you might, if they don't have a profile picture, you might just see their name. So seeing diversity has been a little bit of a challenge with being mostly virtual this year. But I do know that I'm in a couple of different groups, and I mean, it's like 95% white. I know my brother in the my big in the fraternity, he's Black, and I was really happy to know that I was put with someone in our group that is a person of color because there's only a couple of them. And so I can learn a lot more about his experiences. And not only in business, because we're a business fraternity. So everybody who's in it is in business. So we're like-minded in that way. But to learn from somebody who is completely different than me is, to me, really positive. So I'm glad that our group too is really trying to get more people of color in our group, because business as a field is also predominantly white, and predominantly male. So, you know, I'm glad that Ball State has groups like Women of Business, and we also have a group of African American students. So I'm glad that those things are being pushed, but we definitely need to push more for diversity in clubs on campus, I think, and just groups in general. I know I'm in the concert band, and I think there may have been like 2 people of color. So it's, so there's a lot of whiteness still on campus. So I would just like to see Ball State push a little bit more to encourage people of color to not only join groups, but get on our campus and help make it a more diverse campus.
Do you think Ball State does a good job creating a culture of belonging?
I think so, for the most part. I mean, again, I'm white and I'm female, so I don't know the experience of someone who is a person of color, how they would feel about it. But I know from my personal experience, from what I've seen, Ball State is pretty accepting of people. I know when I was researching colleges, Ball State came up as one of the most LGBTQ friendly campuses in Indiana. And that was huge for me. And it made me really happy to know that Ball State is one of them. So I know that, you know, people want more diversity and they want more inclusion. And so having stuff like that is really helpful. But yeah, I just want to see more people of color on our campus, and not only higher graduation rates for people of color, but also higher graduation rates in general. I was kind of surprised to see that only about 55% of people who go to Ball State graduate. And I don't know if that has to do with the fact that like it's been known as a party school and like people just drop out or whatever. But I do know as well too that college rates for people being in college right now are a lot lower, because people are like, I don't want to do online classes. And I get it. It's hard. It's really hard. But I hope that eventually Ball State can get graduation rates up, not only for people of color, but for everybody in general.
Yeah. I think with most universities, or most public universities, the 4-year graduation rate is around 50% anyway. And I think part of that is just students transferring, and then also a lot of students dropping out.
Yeah, I know, like Purdue's graduation rate, I think, is like 60. So they're a little bit higher. And I think a big part of that is like, you know, if you go to Purdue, the people are like, oh, you went to Purdue. And, you know, I've definitely seen that with my husband. And like, so when I actually applied to Purdue and I didn't get in, but I was really thankful I didn't, because I'm really happy that I came to Ball State, because they have much better programs for what I want to do. Surprisingly, at Purdue, they do not have any kind of sports marketing degree. I was shocked, because they're in the Big Ten. That's huge.
Yeah.
And they don't have anything, because I had asked an advisor and they're like, oh, we just have, you know, regular marketing, and you can use, you know, you can go into sports marketing, but there's no, it's not like here where, you know, double majoring in sports administration is like guaranteeing that I'll end up in sports marketing. And they just don't have that. And I was blown away by that. Now IU does, and that was another place I applied to, but I ended up picking Ball State also because I got a half-ride scholarship here, so that also helped.
Yeah, that's definitely huge.
Yeah.
Awesome. So moving on to the next section of the interview, what has this course meant for you personally?
I think personally, this course has meant a lot, because I have learned what I wanted to, which was to learn more terminology. Like I said, I didn't really know what intersectionality truly was until I was in this class. And that was one that I was really looking forward to learning more about. And I had heard it before in the past, but I just was like, I don't really know. And there's a lot of times, especially with when you're researching topics about, you know, like being a white person trying to research about people of color and their experiences, it can be difficult because you want to get it from a good source, but you also may not know exactly what to look for. And so I was really hoping with this class that we would be able to be given resources that were trusted and were from people of color that have had true experiences to know and have the knowledge to talk about them. And so that's something that I was really thankful for in this class. And just being able to talk to other students. I wish we would have had more people of color in our class to hear more about their experiences, but you know, I mean, that's just what happens. So, but when we had guest speakers who were people of color and watch videos and whatnot, that was really eye-opening and really great to hear. So I'm really thankful to hear about different experiences and terminology.
Yeah, I definitely get that desire to want to learn more about what these terms mean and the experiences of people who aren't white, but then also wanting to make sure that you're getting reliable sources, because I feel like with white people, there's a lot of white people, a lot of the white people that want to learn more and want to be more anti-racist. There's also this fear that by trying to look it up and trying to figure it out on their own, they might accidentally become more racist, or they might type in something to Google search that'll be racist that they don't want showing up on like their search history.
Yeah, and you know, or accidentally saying some kind of microaggression if you're even like asking someone who is a person of color. And there's always I feel like, I wouldn't say always, but there's a fear of asking the wrong questions and diminishing someone's experience, which in turn is a microaggression. And so that's something too that I've always, I want to ask, but then I'm just afraid that I might say the wrong thing and just further make their experience more difficult because of the color of their skin. And so this class has helped me a lot.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about what you learned. Is there anything in particular that you think you will take with you?
I definitely think, like I said, the terminology was huge for me. So that's definitely my biggest takeaway from this class. I rented our books, but I plan on purchasing them for myself because I don't feel like I got to read, especially enough of how to be anti-racist. And it's not by choice. It was just, I am taking 7 classes this semester. So I really just had to focus on what was assigned. And so I plan on purchasing those books once we finish. And I just want to continue learning and to continue to be a good ally and a good person in general. Because I feel like I have always tried to be anti-racist as much as I can. And I've called out racism before and had people tell me that I was crazy, and I just didn't back down because I don't like racism. So those would be my biggest takeaways.
Awesome. It's awesome that you're one to speak up and not back down, because I know I'm a much more shy and reserved personality, so it can be a lot more difficult for me to speak up and then not back down.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of work. I know something I've been told basically my whole life is that I'm too outspoken. And I've always just said, okay, and I don't, I've never, I guess, really seen a problem with speaking up against what's wrong and telling people that's not okay. And I've gotten in a lot of trouble for it. But it never really mattered to me. And being in trouble, to me, I felt good about the fact that I stood up for people. I know one experience I had in particular, my best friend in high school, Henry, he's half white and he's half black, so he's mixed as well. And I remember one time, and he's also gay, so he was very much a part of intersectionality in that whole experience, and still is. And we did like everything together. I remember people would be like, if we were just like not together, people would be like, yo, where's Henry? You know, where is he at? Because we were always together, and like he would spend the night because my parents were like super cool with him, and like it was great. And there was one time we went to the grocery store together, and I think we were just getting like whatever lunch money we had left over for the week, like candy and pop, like normal high schoolers do. And we were in the checkout line, and it was this old white lady who was checking us out at the register, and we put our stuff up there, and she took like one good look at Henry, and she just looked him up and down, and she goes, half white, half black, despicable, just right there. So I want to say this happened in like 2007. So this was a bit ago, but this also tells you about Monroe and how people think. And we both just kind of were like in shock, just total shock, like couldn't move, couldn't. And Henry like immediately just got pale and like just looked ill almost. And he just kind of looked down, and like we finished paying, and I was like, no, we're not standing for this. So I like grabbed his hand because he was like so nervous and so afraid, because a big reason why he didn't even want to come out as gay in our town is because he was afraid he would get jumped at school. And so I, like, after that, and after hearing about that, I was like a giant shield for Henry. I'm like, you do not touch this precious soul. He is amazing. And so we went to customer service, and I complained about the lady. And thankfully the manager was like, that's not okay. And they took her off register immediately. And I don't know what happened after that, but seeing that for the first time, because I'd never experienced anything like that personally. And so seeing that happen like that, it just blew me away that people can be just like outwardly racist, especially at her job. You're on the clock. Like, what are you doing? So that, yeah, I'll never forget that. And I will never forget all of the things that being with Henry, I mean, he was my prom date. I mean, we were just like this, you know, and he moved to Texas. So unfortunately, we're not as close as we used to be, but all the experiences that I saw through his eyes really opened my eyes on how I need to stand up and speak out and be more anti-racist.
So what do you think it means to be an anti-racist, or what does that mean to you then?
Well, continuing with that, I think a big part of it is, like we said earlier, just not shoving things under the rug and trying to be outspoken and speak up when you see something happen. I've seen a lot of videos online where you'll see some Karen going off on some poor woman who's not white, and saying like, oh, you need to speak English, and you know what, I can't understand you. And people are just standing there. Nobody's doing anything. And like, sure, getting the video out helps, because there's been a lot of times where like people that have said those things have gotten fired from their jobs, rightfully so. But just filming and just seeing other people stand there and not do anything is not helping. And so, you know, I've never been in a situation like that where I've seen some lady like yelling like that and saying horrible things. But I know for a fact that if I was there, I would be, oof, yeah. It would be a battle against the mega Karen, that's for sure. So I just think that's a big part of being anti-racist, is just being able to have the confidence to speak up, even if you're not someone of color, even if you don't have the same experiences as the person receiving that racism towards them. Recognize it. And even if you are too afraid to say something in the moment, you know, go to a manager and let them know that something is happening like that. So maybe they can take care of it. Or, you know, whatever you can do to try to just right these wrongs that keep happening towards people of color, I think is being anti-racist.
So where do you see Ball State, Muncie, Indiana, or the US in 5 or 10 years from now?
Well, I hope that Ball State continues with their diversity program and what they have at the multicultural center. I know they're building a brand new center for them. That's really exciting. So I hope with building that new center, there's a lot of attention that is gained to the center and to the programs that they have. I hope this class continues, and I hope more groups that represent people of color stay. I know there's a couple, but I'd like to see more. And I'm sure there are other students who would like to see more as well. When it comes to Muncie, like you said in your interview, Ball State pretty much is Muncie. So hopefully whatever comes out of Ball State is mirrored in Muncie. You know, like you had mentioned earlier with the people that got in their trucks after Trump lost and went to Walmart and were like, oh, we're gonna make the libs cry and all this other stuff. I had seen Snapchats from people like reposting someone's Snapchat and being like, please don't go to Walmart at this time. Please stay home. Like, please be careful. This is not okay. And actually my big in the fraternity had reposted one of them on his Snapchat. And he was just like, I just don't understand. You know, and I had reached out to him and I was just like, I don't know why it's happening either, but, you know, please be careful, whatever you do. And it's really tough when you see stuff like that happening, especially I expected it if he won, but I didn't so much expect it if he lost. But then realizing how the same people who fly Confederate flags took their L, obviously they weren't going to take this L very well either. So it's really unfortunate that they can't just like accept the fact that their racist president that they had for 4 years lost. I'm just thankful he did, because our country, I hope in the next 5 to 10 years, pushes for much, much better change, because I don't think Trump did anything good for anybody that is a person of color, who is LGBTQ. In fact, I know he tried to erase and make things go backwards. And so I know with the Biden administration, they're not going to stand for that. So I would hope within the next 5 to 10 years, our country has become more open-minded. It's really sad that it took as long as it did for gay marriage to be legalized, but I'm happy that it is and it still will be. And so I hope we can continue pushing for even more rights, get children out of cages. You know, just there's a lot that needs to be fixed, but I hope that things like that are improved. I hope also that college can be free, if not way cheaper, because it is way too expensive. And it's almost to the point where it's like, if you don't make over a certain amount of money, you'll never be able to go. And that's really unfortunate, because if we promote education to be not only a better thing, but also if it's cheaper, then we'll have a smarter country overall. And I don't know who wouldn't want that. More educated people in our country is only going to benefit our country. So, and we definitely need more educated people. You know, we're like one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest, and we are struggling in mental health and regular health, and also in college. So I hope those things improve. I really, truly hope also that like mental health is also more recognized as a problem, because it is. Our country is, especially right now during the pandemic, there are so many people who are experiencing depression and anxiety for the first time, and people that have, like myself. are experiencing it more than normal. I know after break, like during break, I was like, oh, this is so nice. And then I got back and my anxiety is just through the roof because I'm like, oh, I have 9 days and there's so much to do and like just trying to keep everything together. And so I hope that we will see an administration that also pushes for better mental health help overall. And then Indiana, I saved that for last because I really don't see much changing, just like you said, unfortunately. When the presidential results were posted, Indiana was the first one to post the results, and it was red as usual. And it's really unfortunate because there are several people in Indiana that want change and voted for change and aren't getting it. And we are so backwards in a lot of ways. I know I frequent the Indiana subreddit on Reddit, and people are constantly saying when it comes to, like, one of them was like, weed legalization, they would be the 51st state as a joke because they just don't, they think. But I remember our governor, he had said that, oh, we're not going to legalize weed here because we're rule followers here. I was like, oh, okay, buddy. It's because Eli Lilly is in your back pocket and they're just down the road from you and they are pill pushers. And so that's why the Midwest is still facing a gigantic opioid epidemic. But okay, buddy. And it took how long for alcohol sales on Sundays? I mean, come on. I know I moved from Michigan, and one of the first days that I had moved here, I went to go buy a beer, just like, I think a 6-pack, and it was Sunday, and I wasn't thinking about it because that's not a rule in Michigan. And I went to buy it, and they're like, well, we can't sell it to you. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like 26. There's no, like, what's the problem? And they're like, no, like, we can't, on Sundays, you can't buy beer. And I'm just like, okay. And they're like, well, you can go to a bar. And I'm like, well, how does that make sense? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So there's a lot of, I know another thing too that I found weird is that, like, Indiana, you can't sell liquor cold for the most part, especially like hard liquor. You can only find like beer and maybe wine that's cold, but like convenience stores and stuff, you won't find that. Whereas you go up to Michigan and they have drive-through liquor stores where you can just get a cold beer. I don't know, like, if that's a good idea, but like, it's a huge difference in states. And so it was very, I wouldn't say culture shock, but it was definitely a shock when I found out about all these rules. And like, they said that you had to carry out your alcohol in a paper bag. So out of the liquor store in Indiana. And it was just crazy to me. So I think Indiana is going to stay backwards for a really long time. And it's a big reason why once I finish at Ball State, I'm getting out of here. And that kind of sucks for Indiana because they need more educated people to stay here. I know Indiana is one of the states that has the least amount of educated, especially college educated people. And I'm sure they want college educated people to stay here, but they're leaving because they're not happy with everything going on in the state. So I would hope I don't even think anything's going to change in 5 years. I really don't. I would hope in 10 years we would see a little bit more of a push for something better. But I'm hoping to not be in the state. I want to move to a state that actually promotes change and appreciates their citizens that want change. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of things like that in Indiana, like with weed legalization, aren't going to change until it changes nationally.
Yeah.
Until it goes like the Supreme Court.
Yep. And I mean, not even decriminalization is here. And, I'm glad to see that I just saw that the House passed the bill, but then it has to go through the Republican-led Senate. So it's likely to die, which is...
I mean, Mitch McConnell might not even bring it up. He might just ignore that it exists.
Yeah. So, it's crazy, but that was a topic that I brought up in class because especially when it comes to drugs and weed in particular, people of color are jailed more frequently than white people. And that's a huge problem. And so if we decriminalized it, and we also, like, I know Illinois, for example, they expunged records of anybody who had been jailed for weed. And that was across the board, everybody, didn't matter what skin color you had. And I was just like, wow, that's a state away, and look what they're doing. And we're surrounded by states that are decriminalizing and going medical, and Indiana is just like, nope. And it just seems really, it's disappointing and frustrating and just annoying in general that we're surrounded by states that are pushing for change, and yet ours is just like, no.
Pushing for anti-change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just don't think they're going to see many people staying in the state if they continue to act, you know, the governor and, you know, the administration in general, if they continue to just stay in their backwards ways, they're going to see a lot less people living in the state. And I don't think that's what they want. They want people to stay here, but why would you want to stay in a place if you can get out and to somewhere that's better? So
yeah, absolutely. So where do you see yourself 10 years from now, and how much of this stuff will you remember?
Well, 10 years from now, my goal is to be working for my favorite hockey team ever, the Detroit Red Wings. I have so much Red Wing stuff. I love Detroit so much. I wrote an essay about Detroit my freshman year at Ivy Tech because, and a lot of it was centered around racism because there's a lot of racism centered towards Detroit. Not only because it's a predominantly Black city, but also because of the fact that there's a lot of blight, and there's a lot of, like, it used to be the richest city in the world when the auto industry was booming. And then when the auto industry crashed, a lot of white people moved to the suburbs. And then people of color who couldn't afford to move to the suburbs stayed in Detroit. It's because of them that Detroit is what it is today, and it's growing again. And a lot of people forget that, but you hear so many racist comments towards Detroit. It's ridiculous. And I love Detroit. It's such a beautiful city. It has so much heart. It's never given up. It could have given up, but it didn't. And so that's a big reason why I want to move back to Michigan and move to Detroit. I want to not only work for my favorite sports team, but a lot of the fans of hockey in general are white. It is a very, very, very white sport. It's as white as the Canadian snow, white. And so I would like to see more people of color involved. There have been more people of color who are playing. I know one of my favorites is PK Subban. He is just an awesome guy all around, and he's also pushing for change. I know so their season got all kind of messed up because of the virus, but when they came back, they were able to play in Canada. And at the time, there were still a lot of protests going on. And I forget his name because I'm horrible with names, but one of the players from the Minnesota Wild is Black. And during the national anthem, he raised his fist in the air the whole time. And, you know, there's been a lot of people who are very much against kneeling during the anthem, but, you know, he raised his fist in solidarity with his Black brethren, not only in the NHL, but just at home. And I was really happy to see the positivity that came with it on social media, because I was expecting a big backlash, like we saw with Colin Kaepernick in the NFL, excuse me. But I'm starting to see more and more people being more positive about people kneeling and putting their fists up during the anthem, because, I mean, personally, I don't see an issue with it. So I would like to help create a more diverse community in the NHL, especially in Detroit. My ultimate goal is to be a director of marketing, so I would be able to also hire and pick my team. And I want to make sure it's diverse as hell, because there's just a lot of whiteness. And it's too comfortable, and you don't see change if you stay comfortable. So you have to just consistently get out of your comfort zone and push for that. And there's too many people that are afraid to get out of their comfort zone and push for change, but that is not something I'm okay with. So that's what I would like to do, and that's where I hope to see myself in 10 years. And what I will remember from this class is, again, the terminology, and I'll be able to take that into my job after college. And also to just like thinking about microaggressions and how I can do my best not to say them, or and also just continue to call out people who say them towards anybody, because it doesn't just happen to people of race, it happens to all sorts of people. So yeah, that's what I'll take away.
All right. Awesome. So is there anything else that you'd like to say or that you'd like to discuss before we conclude this interview?
I know when I asked you that, I was thinking about what I would say. I think the only other thing I would say is that I'm really glad that Ball State offers this course. I know I've mentioned to several people that I've been in this class this semester and that I've really enjoyed it. And a lot of people that aren't at Ball State that have asked me about it have said that they're like, wow, that's really awesome. You know, that's really cool that they offer a class like that. And it is. I agree with them completely. And it makes me feel really good to be at a university that has a course like this. So I hope they continue it for several years, and I hope more students get to learn about it. I think one class in particular that I think we could also add, I don't know if they have it, but I'm not aware of it. If they do, would be a similar class that talks more about gender and sexuality in general, and just learning more about terminology and how we can, basically the same kind of things, how we can be better allies, and how, you know, hearing from people who are in the community. I think that would be really good, because in my redneck town that I grew up in, I didn't know much, if all, anything about gender. And I didn't really know about it until the last couple of years. And there's still so much that I don't know and that I want to learn. So I hope that Ball State can generate a similar class about that topic. But that's it for me.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And good luck on finals next week.
You too.